Loyalty to the Chinese Communist Party is the #1 precondition for a reporter in China. Reporters have to pass an odd exam. 4 of Hong Kong's pro-democracy lawmakers were excluded from the city council, and all others decided to resign in protest. U.S. Secretary of State Mike Pompeo says the CCP is the world's #1 threat to freedom, calling the CCP brutish. Canada reaffirms that Beijing's hostage diplomacy will not work in Canada, and it can only push Canada to grow stronger. And U.S. intelligence officials won't give Democratic presidential candidate Joe Biden national security information until a clear winner of the election is determined. Lawsuits against election fraud are taking place in multiple swing states. Welcome to China in Focus. I'm Tiffany Meyer. First, we turn to China's media outlets. The Chinese Communist Party, or CCP, requires reporters to closely follow the regime's lead, with Xi Jinping at its head. To test them, Chinese reporters must pass an exam to verify that they abide by what are called Xi Jinping thoughts, meaning the regime's policy and viewpoints. Over 200,000 have passed. Failure to pass means reporters' press cards won't be renewed.
China's Administration for Internet Censorship and the State Administration of Radio, Film, and Television jointly hosted a press day celebration over the weekend. At the conference, the Chinese Communist Party ordered all reporters to unite closely around the party, with Xi Jinping as the core. Since last October, the CCP has officially required journalists across the country to pass an exam based on their knowledge of so-called Xi Jinping thought. It tests their loyalty to both the party's policies and regime leader Xi Jinping. Those who fail the test are blocked from renewing their press cards. By the end of October, over 200,000 journalists had already passed the exam. This, according to China's State Press and Publication Administration. The test's question bank includes questions including, should all media serve the goals of the CCP? The correct answer is yes. Another asks, what is the most basic principle of news reporting? The answer is the party's leadership over news and public opinion. And another reads, what are the basic policies of news reporting? The answer is unity, stability, and positive propaganda. Nonprofit Reporters Without Borders is an organization dedicated to protecting press freedom around the world. In its 2020 World Press Freedom Index report, China ranks as 4th worst in the category of global press freedom. However, China ranks the world's #1 in terms of how many journalists are imprisoned. The data shows about 100. Reporting by Chen Han, Li Ming, NTD News.
Property buyers in Qingdao City, Shandong Province are protesting against a real estate developer. The developer, Yuhong Real Estate, has reduced the pricing for its properties by around a third, far below the going rate. The move has left buyers wondering whether the properties were found to have major issues, which would devalue them. Many are now demanding refunds for the real estate they previously purchased from the company. Yuhong's sales office has been packed with buyers since last Wednesday. Some protesters have held a banner reading, "Buy today and worth nothing tomorrow. Refund, refund, refund." They also asked local authorities to intervene. An apartment sold by the developer originally cost about $220 per square foot. At that price, a number of buyers purchased real estate last year. The apartment buildings currently remain under construction and are not yet finished. But now the price has dropped to around $150 per square foot. Buyers have pointed out that the reduction puts the apartments well below market value. Yuhong Real Estate has not responded to buyers' demand so far. Most of the company's salespeople have since left the office. Now we turn to China's military. In an exclusive interview, a former lieutenant colonel from the Chinese Navy tells us that it's only a matter of time before Beijing starts a war.
China is increasingly showing military aggression. Is a war likely to break out? We interviewed Yao Chang, a former lieutenant colonel of the Chinese Naval Command Center, who says that war may be inevitable. He said the final straw for the Chinese Communist Party could be the United States and Taiwan establishing official diplomatic relations. But he said the CCP will not surrender and it won't try to save the Chinese people.
The CCP will not willingly withdraw from history's stage. They know that they have blood debts on their hands. If they give up, people will come to collect those debts. So they will not let go of their weapons, and they will take 1.4 billion people to die with them. It will not leave on its own. A war is inevitable then. Whether it's a large-scale war or a small-scale war, it's only a matter of time.
He says the CCP is not afraid to sacrifice every soldier to fight to the end, and the People's Liberation Army will unconditionally follow the CCP's orders. That's because the CCP severely censors information in China, and the PLA won't be told the real reason it is fighting.
If they knew the truth, they would not fight.
He added, the soldiers' families don't want their child to go to war because usually it is their only child. As a result of China's one-child policy, frequently there is a single child who provides for their parents and grandparents. The thought of losing the only provider to war is unimaginable for many parents.
A single artillery explosion covers a large area. Few come back alive, so there's not many soldiers who wish to put their life on the line for their job.
He also said the only way to put an end to the communist regime and prevent a war is to collapse the CCP's economy.
And in Hong Kong, pro-democracy lawmakers face new pressure from Beijing. The Chinese regime has given power to Hong Kong's executive to expel opposition lawmakers without having to go through the courts.
Hong Kong disqualified 4 pro-democracy lawmakers Wednesday. It's after Beijing passed a resolution allowing the local government to remove lawmakers if they support Hong Kong independence or supposedly threaten national security. The 4 lawmakers confirmed the news.
Today, my mission as a legislator to fight for democracy, freedom in the chamber cannot be continued.
The lawmakers try to make a stand against what many people in the former British colony see as Beijing's whittling away of freedoms. Hong Kong's leader said each member now has to account for their actions.
From now on, every lawmaker who enters such an important legislature must shoulder the responsibility of supporting the basic law of the Hong Kong Special Administrative Region and being loyal to the People's Republic of China.
Hong Kong residents disagreed with the government's decision.
Well, actually, the Legislative Council members are the representatives of the people. It is the people that voted to put them into their positions. The government cannot simply disqualify the lawmakers with different views who objected to their motions. The government has been entirely unreasonable. They never care about the viewpoints of the people of Hong Kong. They do what they want to do.
The region's government says the 4 lawmakers were expelled for endangering national security, but it didn't elaborate.
All Hong Kong pro-democracy lawmakers have decided to resign together in protest of the dismissal of 4 of their own. They said they will hand in their resignation letters on Thursday. The 70-seat Legislative Council is controlled by the pro-Beijing camp. The 15 resigning were the last remaining pro-democracy lawmakers. And in the U.S., Secretary of State Mike Pompeo says the Chinese Communist Party is the world's #1 threat to freedom. He spoke about American principles at the launch of the Ronald Reagan Institute Center for Freedom and Democracy yesterday.
Secretary Pompeo spoke about the importance of freedom and democracy, calling the Chinese Communist Party authoritarian, brutish, and antithetical to human dignity and freedom. Pompeo said the CCP was the central challenge the Trump administration and America would face in the years ahead.
Every place that human freedom wants to flourish, the Chinese Communist Party is resisting it. And so each time we have a conversation at every level between the United States and China, we raise these issues.
Pompeo said he was confident the U.S. would overcome these problems and went on to say that he made sure all U.S. ambassadors would have China-related issues as a top priority.
My ambassadors, no matter where they are in the world, have China at the top of their list. So if you're an ambassador in the Democratic Republic of Congo or in South Korea, you know that the Chinese Communist Party is intent on impacting that country, and we are determined to make sure that we use our capacity to push back against that challenge.
Pompeo made clear that the U.S. required accountability, transparency, and reciprocity from China, going on to say that the party's atrocities in Xinjiang, Tibet, and elsewhere will not be tolerated.
No more illegal claims in the South China Sea, no more coercion and co-optation of American businesses, no more consulates used as dens of spies, no more stealing of intellectual property, and no more ignoring fundamental human rights violations.
Secretary Pompeo said this stance against the CCP required diplomatic as well as militaristic efforts, which is one of the reasons why the Trump administration made historic investments to enhance American armed forces. He also said the administration is continuing to strengthen international institutions like NATO to wake them up to the threat posed by the Marxist-Leninist CCP. Referencing Reagan, the Secretary of State said the innate desire for freedom, for personal autonomy, for human dignity rests in the souls of each of us. Pompeo said he put together the U.S. Commission on Inalienable Rights, which attempted to reground American foreign policy in these fundamental understandings about human dignity. He said policies must be grounded in a love of America, which will see America as a leader and its allies and the U.S. emerge stronger and freer. He emphasized that the promise of America's freedom does not pit oppressors against the oppressed or focus on materialism. According to him, American freedom is the reality that all men and women are made in the image of God, with certain inherent God-given rights just by the virtue of our humanity. Christina Kim, NTD News.
Chinese tech company ByteDance filed a petition to challenge the Trump administration's order to stop U.S. operations of the TikTok app. The order comes into effect on Thursday. U.S. officials say TikTok makes U.S. user data accessible to the Chinese Communist regime. TikTok denies the allegations. Walmart and Oracle were to take stakes in the new company to oversee the app's U.S. operations. But the security concerns were not eliminated because the Chinese parent company would still oversee operations. Now we turn to a Chinese American in New York who says the American people deserve an honest election and said she wanted to help achieve that.
No matter what side of the aisle they're on, many Chinese Americans say the U.S. election must be an honest one. That includes Chinese netizens. A Twitter post circulating last week wrote, "The Trump team urgently needs analysts to help investigate cheating in Pennsylvania's vote count. Anyone that can help, please contact." We interviewed the contact person, Liu Rong. She told us over 100 Chinese Americans called to offer their help, adding that she was merely helping to circulate the message online. Liu works as a researcher in a New York university. She explained the events on election night caught her attention, adding that she finds it highly suspicious that vote counting was suddenly halted that evening.
Think about it. The counting was called off at 2 a.m. This has never happened in American history. Every election gets the result the same day. Why did they call it off? What's more, how come they suddenly continued at 4 a.m. in the morning?
Liu's father is a high-ranking official in the Chinese regime and served in Beijing's Red Army. But she's been living in the U.S. for over 2 decades. She says she values democracy and freedom, values rarely found in today's China.
I love China. I love Chinese people. I love justice. I do not love evil. I do not love the Chinese Communist Party because it is evil. I do not love it because it exports corruption. I criticize it heavily.
Liu's parents still live in China. As a result, some of her friends often remind her to be careful of what she says publicly. That's because they worry that her parents could be harassed by Chinese police. But she says she's not afraid.
I'm not afraid. I have to speak out against the CCP's evil. Chinese people have been enslaved for so long. If people only eat, drink, and dress well but do not have freedom, it means nothing.
Liu says she supports President Trump because of his tough stance towards the CCP. Reporting by Xu Wenhui, NTD News.
And in Canada, Prime Minister Justin Trudeau said on Wednesday the country will not cave in to pressure from China. He cited the case of Chinese tech giant Huawei's chief financial officer Meng Wanzhou. Meng was arrested in Canada on a U.S. warrant almost 2 years ago. In an interview, Trudeau said the Canadian government doesn't believe in coercive diplomacy, adding that if you start giving in to that kind of pressure, you'll leave yourself worse off for the long term. He explained that China continues to think that they can just put enough pressure on Canada and we will give in, but that's exactly the opposite of our position. U.S. federal prosecutors allege that Meng misled U.S.-based banks about the company's business dealings in Iran, causing the banks to violate U.S. sanctions. Meng denied the charges. Soon after Meng's arrest, the Chinese Communist Party detained 2 Canadian citizens on espionage charges. It's widely believed to be an act of retaliation. The UK is tightening measures to block foreign investment that threatens national security. That's according to a proposed bill published on Wednesday that covers sectors such as defense and energy. The National Security and Investment Bill will give ministers greater powers to scrutinize and intervene in malicious foreign investment. Earlier this year, the UK blocked Chinese firm Huawei from parts of the UK's telecom networks over concerns about spying. This highlighted the UK's increasing wariness of threats to national security posed by Beijing. All eyes are on the contested U.S. presidential election. Legacy media have already projected Joe Biden as the president-elect, but lawsuits and reports of election fraud in key swing states are keeping the world in suspense. Wisconsin and Georgia both have recounts pending. Wisconsin's over reports of irregularities in several counties, and Georgia's Secretary of State announced on Wednesday there will be a hand recount of the presidential race. Nevada has a pending lawsuit alleging voter fraud. Michigan and Arizona both have lawsuits. Michigan's over fraud alleging tens of thousands of unsecured ballots arriving in out-of-state vehicles. And Arizona's over rejected votes in one of the biggest counties. And Pennsylvania has two separate lawsuits. The Trump campaign is challenging Republican observers not being allowed to supervise the ballot tabulating process and challenging the extension deadline for absentee ballots. A data analysis raises questions over the accuracy of Pennsylvania's ballots. This comes as the Trump campaign files a lawsuit hoping to trigger a recount. NTD's Juliet Song reports.
A data analysis found two anomalies in Pennsylvania's mail-in ballots, ballots with impossible postmarks, and voters that are too elderly. This raises the question of whether something is wrong with the ballots or the voter database. The analysis is based on the state's voter database, which is open to the public. Among them, over 20,000 ballots are marked as having been returned to the ballot office before the date they were sent to voters. Over 30,000 are returned on the same day. Over 9,000 have no sent date, and over 50,000 marked as returned one day after being mailed. These are extraordinary turnaround times at best, given the post office's average handling time. And this contradicts the time it takes to cast mail-in ballots in Pennsylvania, as voters have to request a ballot, receive it in the mail, and then mail or send it back in person. The process could take several days or weeks. There could be one reason behind ballots with no sent date, that voters cast them in person, as they are allowed to walk through the process in one shot if visiting a designated location. But it won't be enough to explain the ballots returned on the same day. As the voter database says, if ballots are marked with a sent date, then it means the ballot would be mailed to the voter. Put together, over 100,000 ballots have impossible or unlikely dates, which accounts for almost 4% of the total. The researcher who conducted the study requested to remain anonymous. The discovery comes during a contested race in Pennsylvania, where Biden currently leads by a relatively large margin, with Biden at 49.79% and Trump at 49.06%. The Trump campaign filed a lawsuit this Monday, alleging Pennsylvania's election process violated the Constitution. They are also hopeful that the lawsuit could trigger a recount. Analysis of the state's voter data also saw an age anomaly. Pennsylvania's oldest known person is 113 years old, but in the database, over 30 people are even older, and about 60% of them share the exact same birth date, January 1st, 1900. Reporting by Juliet Song, NTD News.
A red wave is sweeping through some Democrat-held districts in California. It has added a net of 5 seats to the GOP in the House. According to new projections, Michelle Parks Steele won a Democrat-held U.S. House district in California. Steele is a member of the Orange County Board of Supervisors. She will be one of the first Korean-American women in Congress, along with fellow Representative-elect Marilyn Strickland. Steele's win is one of a number of triumphs for Republicans in Democrat-held districts, at least 7 of them by women. Democratic presidential candidate Joe Biden is not getting national security information. That's as intelligence officials say they won't connect with Biden's team until a clear winner of the election is determined.
U.S. intelligence officials are not in contact with Biden's transition team. That's because the General Service Administration, or GSA, has not yet decided who won the election. In an email statement to NTD's sister media, The Epoch Times, the Office of the Director of National Intelligence said the agency follows the statutory direction and that they would not have contact with any transition team until notified by the GSA. The GSA previously said they will only initiate the transition when a winner is clear. Under a 1933 law, the GSA is the one that decides when a winner is determined. It then authorizes the president-elect to communicate with federal agencies and provides funding to the transition team. Biden was asked on Tuesday about not getting intelligence briefings. He said the presidential daily brief would be useful, but it's not necessary. Despite lacking a final call from GSA, Biden's transition officials told the Washington Post they have already started working through informal channels to learn what's going on in the government. That's through talking with organizations close to the government and former federal staff members.
No doubt.
Meanwhile, Biden has already made phone calls to foreign leaders, including the UK and Canadian prime ministers, Germany's chancellor, and the French president. President Trump says the election is not over. His campaign is fighting legal battles against potential election fraud and illegal actions in battleground states. NTD won't call the presidential race until all challenges are resolved. So far, in states including Michigan and Nevada, lawsuits have been filed containing affidavits of poll watchers and witnesses alleging irregularities and frauds. Meanwhile, Biden's lead in Arizona has slowly decreased as new bundles of ballots are added to the count. Penny Zhou, NTD News.
Biden's campaign is fundraising to fight the Trump campaign's lawsuits in battleground states. The Biden campaign said in a Tuesday email that it wants to raise $30 million. So far, the Trump campaign has filed lawsuits in Pennsylvania, Arizona, Georgia, Nevada, and Michigan. Some of the lawsuits are making their way through the state and federal judicial systems. And that's all for today's China in Focus. Thanks for watching and see you tomorrow.